Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by John, who's a beginning photographer from Michigan. John shot this with a Canon Digital Rebel 17 to 85 zoom at ISO 400 and f5.6, exposed the file for 1/100th of a second. One of the things that John mentioned in his backstory was being drawn to this real dramatic quality of light. At the end of the day, I'm also really enjoying the quality of light here. I'm really enjoying this beautiful contouring line at the top of the trees in the background of the image, and the way that moves me through the image in the background in a very dynamic way. There's also a really beautiful sense of implied movement from one subject to the next in the close part of the shot. These grasses and how they feel like they're separating, and then after that I see these saplings in here separating. We talk about implied energy. There's a real dynamic movement in the lower part of the image too that I think plays off of the background in a beautiful way. Another thing that I really enjoy in this image is the fence, and I like it for a couple of reasons. It gives the image another layer of story, and the idea of things like doorways and fences and gates, those are psychologically powerful for viewers. They're archetypes. For me, it starts to give me the potential to imagine sort of being there and standing behind the fence and looking out and thinking about this place, where it might be, and John's relationship to the landscape here, and is this a backyard? And I start to think about other things that are outside of the frame in a powerful way instead of a distracting way. And the other thing that's true about the fence here is it represents a really powerful design motif, which we see over and over and over again in painting and cinema and still photography, and that's the idea of a man-made sort of hard-edged geometry playing with more of a natural, softer, or rounded geometry. A lot of things to really enjoy in the image. One of the main things that I wanted to talk about today as a takeaway and perfect world variation for this image is the idea of color balance and maybe trying to get a little more color depth into this image. I'm not saying that that's always the way to manage your photographs. Color cast can be used in a very powerful and very creative way. So much of the time in scenes where there's the potential for different color temperatures of light to be expressed, a lot of the times I will be going for in my editing the sense of warm light in some places, cool in others, and sort of a visual sea level, or a neutral gray or neutral white or neutral black. One of the reasons that I work on that in my editing is that that's closer to the way that we actually see. Our eyes and brains working together doing this amazing job of white balancing so that we see a given subject in a consistent way from a color standpoint throughout the day. And obviously the camera doesn't have the ability to do that, and digital and film will express very, very strong overall color cast in situations where the light has a real strong color cast to it. A couple of different ways that we could think about managing this. So much of the time I'll be working at the level of the raw converter, shooting in raw to deal with this. If we just go to Bridge here and browse this image in Bridge, the newer raw converters in Adobe Photoshop will allow you to work on raw files, of course, but also JPEGs and TIFFs. So this is a JPEG file. I'm just going to, on a Mac, hit Command R. On a PC you could hit Control R. That's the shortcut for opening up the raw converter. And we could go about this a couple of different ways. We could play around with white balance by moving these sliders. Color temperature slider here, going back from feeling of blue to yellow. And there's a lot of warmth here, so we could sort of cool off here. There's also a feeling for me of quite a bit of not just kind of red, but also magenta, so I could come to the tint slider and play around with green. And you can see that we're starting to move towards now a setting for this file that's starting to bring up more blue and more green, starting to get more color depth, and the fence itself is starting to move towards more of a visual sea level. Uh-oh, sorry about that. I hope that wasn't too loud on the microphone. I knocked over my card reader here in front of my computer. We could also go about this in another way. We could make this white balance tool active, and we could come in and we could click on something that we wanted to be color neutral, like gray, and then from there play around with the sliders. So much of the time in the raw converter in a general scene that has the potential to express warm, cool, and color neutral, A lot of times I will convert 3 files out of the raw converter. I have a lot of control over white balance here. One will be for an area that I want to be color neutral, let's say the fence. I'll try to take a part of the fence and really make it a true gray point, and maybe another I'll convert out warm and another cool. And a lot of times my starting point in my Photoshop editing will be to use those 3 versions as layers, and then use layer mask to blend them to have quite a bit of color depth right in the beginning of my workflow. Let's go back to Photoshop. When I'm in Photoshop, a lot of times I will go to the adjustment layer panel and I'll go to curves and I'll play around with these droppers right here. This is to set a black point, this is to set a gray point, and this is to set a white point. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and hide bridge, and then I'm going to hit the F key to change screen viewing mode here. Go to full screen viewing mode, and I just held down the space bar to use the hand tool to move the image back over. I'm going to hit the Z key, and then I'm just going to click, and I'm going to zoom in. Space bar again to use the hand tool to move the image, and I'm going to activate this dropper right here, which is set an image to or sample an image to set a gray point. And then I could come in here and click and play around with white balance ideas here, and you can just see in this lower part of the image that colors are separating in a very dramatic way now if we turn this on and off. So I'm going to go back to the zoom tool on my Mac. I'm going to hold down the Option key on a PC, Alt, to zoom the image where we can see all of it now. And I'm going to go back to full screen. I'm going to go back to the screen mode that we started out in. And now I'm going to go back to layers, and I'm going to fill the mask with black. Command delete on a Mac, Control delete on a PC, get the brush tool, and start doing the kind of work that I do when I am painting on a mask. I'm always at 0 hardness on the brush, and I'm also going to start at a low opacity and build the change up. So let's go to somewhere around 20%. I know I'd like to have more blue in the sky up here, so I'm just going to use a big brush and bring the blue in there. And I also know that in these areas that could represent green, I'd like to bring in a little bit more green. And so I'm just going to paint in those areas. One of the really cool things about this image is that there's the potential for green moving across the image in a dynamic way, in the same way that this contouring line is moving across. There's the potential for some green there. There's the potential for green there. There's some green over here on the edge, even maybe a little bit of green in that shadow. And then I'd like to push the fence toward more of a color neutral, particularly right in here where it's in the shade. I could even push that towards blue. And when I get to here, I look at this and I think, I'd like to bring the color back just a little bit. I'm getting some color depth now, but overall the colors look a little bit hot to me. This is a very traditional scene. It's this real traditional landscape with things that the viewer can compare to reality in a very easy way. So I'm going to go back to adjustments, adjustment layer panel, and I'm going to go to hue saturation, and I'm just going to dial the saturation back a little bit here to somewhere like this, and I'm just going to do that globally. And I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to get a big brush. I'm going to go to 10% opacity, and I'm going to continue to play around with the idea of overall cooling this image off a little bit now. And I'm starting to enjoy what's happening now from a color depth standpoint. This is where we started, and we could continue to push this if we wanted to get more and more color separation. One other thing that I'll say here about this image is I think there's the potential for a variation where you actually really push the idea of the fence. When we go up to the top of the room in images and we finish ideas that are very archetypal or very mature subjects, like these fall trees, then we can start to say one thing to the viewer about this shot. If I come in and I crop that subject at the top and start to make the whole thing a little bit more mysterious, not only that, but I start to push this towards more the idea of the fence, and the fence being a powerful subject. The viewer can now imagine the sky and imagine the rest of the sky But now in this lower part of the image, to me, there's an image that might have more psychological impact on the viewer, and they might move more, at least from a psychological standpoint, into the story of the image, because the fence, which is a very powerful archetypal idea, and it's the juxtaposition too, with the idea of nature and natural and what's on the other side of the fence, that starts to come into the story a little bit more, and I definitely could see a panoramic variation of this image that plays more with the idea of the fence and what it means in the story. Really love the quality of light, this beautiful end of the day light that John is working with here, and really like the way he's framed the beautiful contouring line of the trees in the background and played that off of the beautiful grasses and the way they move in the foreground. Really nice image from John. I want to say a big thank you to him for sharing this image with us on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.